Hey, I'm Guy White, the child custody guy. I wanted to talk about some things regarding a custody evaluation today and overcoming the custody evaluation. A lot of attorneys will not challenge a custody evaluator in the event their client doesn't get a favorable evaluation. And I want to go over 4 things that you can do to overcome the custody evaluation. By the way, I wouldn't hire an attorney and you interview them, ask them this. Will they challenge a custody evaluation and the evaluator when it comes to an unfavorable evaluation in your case? Because what good is an attorney if the custody evaluator gets it wrong and your lawyer won't challenge them? Then you need somebody with some backbone. So you're going to have to get rid of that one. I wouldn't even hire that one. I know a lot of people don't say these things, but I do, because I've been around over 30 years dealing with these attorneys that don't have the stones to go after a bad evaluator. And your children has to live with this outcome. Can't do it. Anyway, so some of the 4 points I was going to talk about here is, one is investigating any facts, collateral witnesses, or collateral evidence that the evaluator failed to investigate or failed to consider in your case. Did they do their job? Did they interview the people that you gave them names of during your intake? You do this intake, and during this intake, you're going to write down people that have seen you parent before. Sometimes they're family members, sometimes they're friends. It could be daycare workers, babysitters, school teachers. Could be all kinds of people. But anyway, they're supposed to interview them if they ask for 3 or 4. Sometimes they don't interview them at all. In the event that they don't interview them, that might help you with your case of trying to overcome the evaluation, have it thrown out, have it start over, get a different evaluator, file a motion to throw out the evaluation. It's erroneous, as I talked about in my book, because they didn't cover all their bases. Another thing that you want to be able to do is hire another evaluator expert to critique how they did their evaluation. They may have not used the standards. Now, there's standards here with the American Bar Association. There's standards with I believe it's called the American Psychology Association or something like that. And so the Board of Psychology, the American Board of Psychology, some of these groups, they have an outline of how custody evaluators are supposed to do these evaluations. There's a standard. A lot of them don't use that standard. There's an organization, I think it's called the American Matrimonial Attorneys. There's a standard there that describes what custody evaluators are supposed to do and the guidelines. So they may violate their own rules when they do the evaluation, which can be one way of having it thrown out. So you want to have an expert look at that in the event that they didn't follow the protocol of how they're supposed to perform their evaluation. Another thing that you want to do is you want to subpoena the custody evaluators' notes, their tests that you took, the scores, how they were scored. You're going to need to know all these things, because sometimes custody evaluators will send them out to be scored. Sometimes they'll do it themselves. It's just a mixed bag. So you need to know what protocols were followed in reference to the testing. Now, they can grade these things subjectively instead of objectively, which is kind of frightening, okay? And personally, I think the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory 2, and now they have the 3. I interviewed a therapist on my radio show years ago, and he said it's just a snapshot. So essentially, it's not that valuable, except for the fact that they depend on it. But how effective is an MMPI in determining someone's personality disorder? Yeah, it might be 80% effective. That's what this therapist said to me. But, excuse me, but I don't know. But you know what I do know is behavior is much more powerful. Much more powerful. The pattern of behavior is much more powerful than any psychological test. So when you take a look at a psychological test, it's just a lazy way of trying to figure somebody out, isn't it? But if you have somebody's behavior that you can document over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I think that's much more powerful. Even though a lot of times attorneys, judges, and custody evaluators don't even look at that. On the other hand, sometimes custody evaluators want to know your family tree, but do they really consider it when they're doing an evaluation, whether or not history repeats itself? Let's say you have a family, your parents are alcoholics, you have an alcohol problem, they look for that apple doesn't fall far from the tree kind of thing. That's possible. I mean, I've read through so many custody evaluations over the years where they would say, like, this parent has a predisposition to be an alcoholic, or they have an alcoholic's personality. There's all kinds of things they come up with these tests. But what I wrote in my book and what I talked about in a video that I sell on my website about authenticating evidence, and that is, my job is to take the ball away from everyone. That's the way I see it. I take it away from the attorneys. I take it away from the judge. I'm going to take it away from the custody evaluator, meaning that I'm going to help my client build such a strong case with evidence that the only outcome would be my client getting sole custody. And you're going to say, gee, Guy, that's a tall order. Yeah, it is a tall order. And it sometimes takes a team. But it's possible. I do it all the time. Recently, I've had 3 clients that had physical custody awarded to them by custody evaluators. And the reason that happened is because we built a case and we inundated the custody evaluator with evidence, all kinds of evidence. We collected it, we authenticated it, and then we delivered it to that custody evaluator. We did their job for them. And if you do their job for them, they have a problem because they have to ignore solid evidence. So when you're trying to overcome a bad evaluation, you're going to probably need an expert to critique what that custody evaluator did or didn't do. Another thing that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to take that custody evaluator's deposition, get them under oath, and you may need to use that expert to help write questions for the attorney to ask the evaluator. Because again, if they're not trained in psychology and they don't understand the psychological testing or some of the protocols that weren't followed, then you're going to have to educate your attorney on how to take a deposition of that custody evaluator. And that's super important. So if you have their notes, you have any audio and video that the custody evaluator used for their evaluation, you have their report, you go through the report line by line, and you're going to highlight things that you know that are not true, and you may have to subpoena some evidence to prove it's not true. It's quite an operation, but I've had a couple custody evaluators actually thrown out of the court system for some of the things they've pulled in these custody evaluations. They're not Teflon. In some jurisdictions, they have a lot of power, because there's not a lot of them, and they don't want to upset the apple cart. The judge doesn't either. But on the other hand, you can't accept an erroneous or a biased or a corrupt custody evaluation because your children will suffer greatly. All right, well, thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed this one, and thank you for allowing me to express my opinion.